think training harder always means getting better? Well, that mindset is destroying fighters faster than any opponent. If you're pushing through pain, fighting fatigue, or feeling burned out, this video reveals why and exactly how to fix it. After 25 years coaching fighters and experiencing this firsthand, I've learned exactly where hardcore becomes harmful. And I'm living proof standing here right now on crutches after hip surgery. There's a sweet spot between optimal and peak performance that most fighters miss. And once you find it, everything changes. Miss this and you'll keep breaking down when you should be leveling up.
Fighters, welcome back to another episode of Heatrick Muay Thai Performance.
Combat sports have so many athletic qualities and technical and tactical skills demanding our attention that training opportunities are inexhaustible. But is fighter performance training healthy? In truth, the objectives are different when either training for optimal health or training for peak performance, even if both walk hand in hand for part of the journey. There's a tipping point leading to divergent paths when the need for short-term performance in competition outweighs the need for long-term health. Because optimal health and peak fitness are not one and the same. Not enough fitness is certainly unhealthy, but pushing beyond the sweet spot into extreme fitness or peak performance starts to cause problems too. I see many pro and hobbyist fighters alike rightly working incredibly hard on their training, but mistakenly believing that every session must push them harder than the last. Go hard or go home has its place. However, this attitude is greatly misplaced and oversimplified. Understanding when this kind of maximal effort is needed and when it's not is what separates those that become the best they can be from those that boom and bust. In this episode, I'll explain what the difference is between optimal and peak performance training and how to use both approaches to best effect as a fighter. Let's get right into it. To achieve your own highest level, it's crucial you understand that peak performance is a temporary window, and if you try to hold it open too long, you lose. Timing your peak performance for a fight date, or periodically for those that don't compete, is how you'll achieve an ever-increasing rise in long-term performance. Peak performance is short-term. It can only happen when the conditions are at their best, when you've built athletic qualities in the right order, converting one into the other from a general athletic base into fight-specific power, speed, and relentless endurance. And when you're perfectly rested and fueled, ready to unleash hell, free from fatigue and distraction. To peak, your training workload should temporarily overreach, then immediately follow with a training taper that drastically reduces your workload. Outside of these short-term peak performance windows, the rest of your training should develop optimal performance. Optimal performance is long-term. It strives for the best you can do given less than ideal conditions. Consistent effort over the long term makes the biggest difference to your performance. And to do this, you must bend but not break. It's useful to think of each training day's intensity as falling into one of three categories, either developmental, stimulating, or restorative. Or as Coach Charlie Francis would describe them, high days, low days, and rest days. These distinctions are important for fighters because fighters are a demographic who love to push hard and typically see less value in anything that's not maximal. But understanding how to program training for optimal gains in long-term performance gives permission to push hard on certain days, high developmental days, maintain momentum on other days, low stimulation days, and to recover when needed to on other days as well, the rest restorative days. That's how the days within your training week should shape up. However, it's also important to scale developmental weeks and restorative weeks too. Each new block of training introduces training at a lower intensity, then progressively turns up the intensity to maximal before deloading to allow restoration before repeating the cycle at a higher level again. Effectively, you take one step back in order to take 2 or 3 steps forwards again. Adopting this incremental loading and unloading approach will see you striding past the performance level of less disciplined fighters. You can ride continuous waves of intensity that wash ever higher as the training phase rolls on. And it's important to understand that developmental loads aren't all maximal. They simply sit above the threshold that stimulates improvement. You don't need to overdo it here. For example, when using resistance training to build strength on a low week, I'll prescribe a load that is lighter than you can handle. You'll finish the set feeling you had 3 or 4 reps left in reserve. That's enough to create a developmental stimulus, but also gives you room to push harder next week and force the body to adapt even further. This way, the medium week that follows will feel like you've got 2 reps left in reserve. Next, the high week is maximal. You can only just complete the number of reps prescribed. There are no reps left in reserve. The following deload week will step back to allow you to recover. It's restorative. And that way you'll feel like you have a good 5 reps left in reserve. Every training block in a fighter's program works through cycles of loading and deloading in this manner to ensure optimal performance and productive gains over the long term. For those that fight very regularly, true performance peaks are reserved for the most important fights, for titles or where rankings matter, whereas optimal is true for the majority of other fights. The objective is not to merely peak your current level of performance for every fight without ever getting any better. The objective is to build long-term performance so that in a year you'll be a different fighter, and in a few years you'll be untouchable. This is very different to the flat, cyclic progress that a vast majority of fighters make with their athletic performance between one fight and the next. Investing time and effort to developing and using a solid training program pays back in a way that may not be hugely noticeable in the short term, a month or two, but holding your focus, keeping with it for longer periods, compounds your progress incredibly, while others slip back and are doomed to repeat. It's clear that short-term gain can lead to long-term loss. It's important not to just burn bright for a short time, only to either prematurely cut a competitive career short or remain burned out for the remainder of your days. And with a little thought, we can exploit the best of both reliable, repeatable short-term peaking and long-term health or awesomeness. It's useful to think of ourselves as a special kind of battery that can improve its performance over time. One that can be developed to produce even more charge and for even longer, but only if we both progressively push our training higher, but critically, we recharge our energy properly too. Wasting your energy on activities that don't improve your performance or that continue to leave your battery flat when you need it, it isn't helpful. It may feel hardcore, but it's unnecessary wear and tear and leads you away from sustainable progress and into unsustainable breakdown. And personally, I'm at the age where I'm reaping the effects of a misspent youth. In the past, I overused movement patterns and lacked a balanced training structure. And although it went unnoticed at the time, now my body reminds me that my shoulder is worn from excessive overarm throwing, and that my hips have also had more than their fair share of extreme range of motion and high repetition. None of this is serious at all, and I'm still functioning well above my age-matched peers. But knowing what I know now and applying that 30 years ago could have seen me even more capable than I am now. I did the best I could with what I had at the time, but it's crazy to consider how much human performance science has evolved in 30 years and now better informs physical training. We now know far more about what helps and what hinders performance, both in the short term and in the longer term too. I mention aging as an acid test of training practices that have either proved to be productive or not over the longer term. However, being the most productive in your training is equally important when you're in your prime too. It's just as painful to consider all that wasted effort I spent working hard going in the wrong directions. And for us fighters, effort is part of the culture and often misused. We get caught up in our passion for the sport, which ultimately drives a real personal purpose. And when we manage to balance the optimal amount of work needed to progress the quickest and the amount of work that we can physically tolerate, at this point, our activities are sustainable and everything's good. But fueled by a fighter's culture, it's easy to tip beyond passion and purpose and into obsession and burnout. Now our activities aren't sustainable and things don't look good, either in the short term or when you graduate in the long term. Being supremely fit often isn't healthy. However, although both peak fitness and optimal health may start pushing in opposite directions on an overlapping spectrum, well-managed training can see you sustainably achieving both. Fighters burn out all the time. Hobbyists, amateurs, and pros alike must all learn how to balance high-intensity fight training with adequate recovery to not only peak on fight night, but to optimize long-term fight performance and health too. We all have a Goldilocks zone that boosts our performance without sending us into overtraining burnout or injury blowout. And spoiler alert, this zone is a moving target. But there are tricks of the trade you can use to plan your training just right. And the same principles apply regardless if you're balancing the demands of work, family, and friends alongside either a full-time fight career, an enthusiastic Muay Thai hobby, or anything in between. We'll start by looking at how much training is needed to make you better. We know that too little training is ineffective. If the combination of training intensity and quantity is too low for you, your body isn't stimulated enough to bother adapting, getting fitter. Because your body can already cope with it, it won't change. When you only just break this threshold, your body will change to better cope with this kind of training stress in the future. You become fitter. You've reached the ideal minimum training dose, the sweet spot with just enough training to make you better without either increasing risk of injury or illness or wasting progress by jumping steps that will cause your development to stall in the future. This is the most sustainable and effective level of training that you can achieve. Pushing above the minimum training dose becomes increasingly less effective and less sustainable. You're wasting effort and heading into an early training plateau where others with more patience will continue climbing. Not only that, but your risk of injury shifts into the danger zone too. The training sweet spot or Goldilocks zone is unique to you and it moves up or down depending on your level of activity. For example, if you've recently taken a break from training due to illness, injury or holidays, whatever, your training momentum has reduced. Training momentum is my own term and I'll explain what I mean. It's like riding a bike uphill. If you're already rolling and built momentum, you can pedal along in a higher gear, no problem. But if you need to stop, then trying to start off in the same gear isn't going to be the best idea. Changing down to a lower gear will see you getting back up to speed again quickest and safest. The same is true of athletic training. You've either built up momentum and can successfully use higher training intensities and longer durations, or you need to build that training momentum up. But how much training is too low and ineffective, and how much training is too much and wasting long-term progress and increasing risk of injury? Where is the most effective, most sustainable sweet spot for you? Just like cycling uphill, it depends on how much training momentum you already have. And I have a trick for determining what your momentum currently is and how hard to push your training to hit your sweet spot. We can think of your current week's training load as being the combination of how intense your sessions are, how long those sessions are, and how many sessions you had that week. And we can think of your training momentum as the rolling average of this weekly load over the last 4 weeks. Comparing next week's training load to the training momentum, that rolling average over the previous 4 weeks, will tell you all you need to know. Researchers Blanch and Gabbett call this the acute chronic workload ratio, and they determined both how much training is too little and too much, both resulting in the highest probability of injury. Too little training leaves your body less capable of handling physical challenges without injury or illness. And too much training leaves you too worn out to handle challenges either. Either way, performance and health both suffer. It turns out that if this week's training load is either below 80% of the training momentum your body has become used to over the previous 4 weeks of training, or above 130% of that, then the risk of injury increases significantly. And at 150%, you enter the danger zone, where the risk far outweighs any possible reward. It makes sense, but how can you quantify training to this extent? I'll share with you how I do this for the clients I work with online. First, I plan each session's average target intensity on an RPE, rate of perceived effort scale, of between 1 to 10. 1 being so easy you can do it all day, every day, and 10 being flat out maximal, like you could die any second. I do this for every session in the program: resistance training, cardio conditioning training, and Muay Thai training. And I also note down how long those sessions are in minutes. Multiplying the RPE intensity score by the number of minutes gives me a training impulse or TRIMP score, which quantifies the training load and how tiring that session is likely to be. By totaling those all up for the week and comparing that to the rolling average of the previous 4 weeks, I can ensure that the program is shooting at the sweet spot. It'll be the most effective at boosting performance without causing injury or overtraining. For those that like to dig a little deeper, I also plan each 4-week training block with 3 weeks of progressive loading. That's low, medium, and high weeks. and 1 deload week for recovery before entering the next targeted 4-week training block. If you're watching the video version of this episode, you can see what these numbers look like for every week of training for the whole 16-week first phase of training in my Heavy Hitters program. That's 4 weeks of mobility and movement, followed by functional strength, then explosive power, and finally maximum speed before tapering for peak performance in the most important fight at the end of the whole first phase, just as I show in my Optimal Fight Camp Blueprint download. And you'll find links to that with this episode too. When coaches consider both chronic monthly training momentum and the acute weekly training load, fighters can get stuck into their training without having to worry if they're either doing too much or too little, and can make the best out of their training time. And regardless if you're a Muay Thai hobbyist or a full-time pro, your training must both progressively scale up and be consistent over the long term if you want to make significant progress. Finding your personal Goldilocks sweet spot makes all the difference. It can bring you back safely after a layoff from training and safely push you on when you need to find the next gear in your training program too. One thing's for sure, at some stage every fighter will push their training too far and burn themselves out, likely getting sick or injured, along with feeling grumpy, depressed, and lacking motivation to train at all. You can both catch this before it happens and recover from it quicker if you understand the 3 stages on the overtraining continuum. Only then can you choose the right recovery methods to match where you are on this continuum to promote recovery and avoid making things worse. To get the best results from your training, it's crucial to find that sweet spot where you challenge your body enough to trigger positive changes, but not push yourself beyond your limits. Overdoing it can lead to diminishing returns and increase the risk of injuries, something I've experienced firsthand, especially now I'm over 50. Getting older reduces the tolerance of this sweet spot and reveals the wear and tear you may have needlessly inflicted when you were younger. As fighters, our attitude towards pain and discomfort is often ingrained in us to excel in the ring. However, applying this mindset to every training session can lead us down a path of self-destruction. It's a classic example of your strengths also being your flip side weakness. We're all equally cursed and blessed. But don't worry, I've got some valuable insights to share. Let's focus on what to do when you've gone a bit too far and experienced burnout. It happens to the best of us, and it's essential to recognize the signs early on. There are 3 different levels to overtraining. Functional overreaching, for instance, might cause a few days of underperformance, but leads to full recovery. It's like a well-planned peak in your training. On the other hand, non-functional overreaching is more concerning, resulting in underperformance for up to 3 weeks before bouncing back. We definitely want to avoid this level, so it's crucial to make adjustments to your training and recovery protocols before it gets to this stage. The most severe stage is overtraining, where underperformance can linger for 2 months or more, and recovery might take months or even years. That's why it's essential to be vigilant and listen to your body for any warning signs. To catch yourself before pushing into the serious state of overtraining, watch out for a combination of the following: an increased rate of perceived effort in baseline tests such as a 5K run or maximum push-ups before form breaks down. Failing to hit the majority of your target loads and reps in resistance training sessions on high week. Persistent illness or injury. Higher than normal resting heart rate. Reduced heart rate recovery in 30 seconds after reaching anaerobic threshold heart rate. And I'll link in the show notes if you need to know more on that. Increased blood pressure. Poor sleep or changes in sleep quality. Altered appetite and weight loss. Depressed mood. Loss of motivation to train. Irritability, quick to anger. If you suspect you might be moving towards non-functional overreaching or overtraining, there are initial steps you can take. You can prioritize rest and scale back your training. Emphasize soft tissue work such as foam rolling or massage alongside low-intensity swimming. Focus on improving your sleep quantity and quality. Pay attention to proper hydration and nutrition. Treat any injuries or illnesses promptly. Adjust your training plan to find the right balance between intensity and recovery. To recover even quicker, it's important to use methods that address either overreaching or overtraining, as they both have different underlying hormonal responses, and using the wrong method will make things worse. When overreaching, your body is in a state of high stress, triggering sympathetic tone, the fight or flight system. Your body is responding to stress hormones circulating your body, but has turned down its sensitivity to them. To counter this, incorporate relaxation methods that promote parasympathetic tone. Gentle, soft tissue work, not too uncomfortable. Hot water therapy, around 39 degrees C or 102 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 25 minutes. Deep water floating or swimming for 10 to 20 minutes. Meditation or breathing practices to reduce stress, such as box breathing. In contrast, if you find yourself in a full-blown overtrained state, your stress hormone production has decreased. In this case, use stimulating methods to kickstart your system to trigger a return to balance. Intensive deep tissue work, going for uncomfortable. Cold water immersion for 1 to 3 minutes, followed by a 2 to 4 minute rest and repeat a few times. Contrast therapy with 2 to 3 minutes of hot and 1 minute of cold water repeated 2 to 4 times. And finally, sauna sessions. Only use these specific overreaching or overtraining recovery methods when needed, or they'll lose their effectiveness. Ultimately, with correct planning and progressive training, you can achieve functional overreaching regularly and avoid reaching the stage of overtraining and total burnout. As fighters, being tough is part of our nature, but let's not ignore the warning signs that lead to extended periods of unproductive training. Always prioritize your well-being and recovery, and you'll be back in the game stronger than ever.
Thanks for listening. If you found this valuable, please like, subscribe, and share with someone else it could help too. Please give the podcast a review or comment below. We'd love to hear from you. As always, you can visit heatrick.com for more Muay Thai performance podcasts, videos, articles, and guides. Catch you next time.